percentages, something that you either love or you hate. That's not really true, actually. Like most of maths, if you get your head around them, they're pretty straightforward, but until then, they're a horrendous source of confusion. So here we go, I'm going to try and explain percentages. Now, first of all, the really important thing you've got to know before you can start to deal with percentages is that a percentage is a fraction. But it's not just any fraction. Not any fraction. It's a fraction out of 100. And that is the key bit of information. It's a bit like knowing that there's 360 degrees in a circle. If you don't know that every single percentage is a fraction out of 100, then they're going to be confusing to you. So let's have a think about that. So I've got some examples down here. So let's take this shape first of all. Bit of pizza, my favourite food. I had pizza tonight for tea. I had a Domino's Sizzler, and boy did it taste good. So let's start with this. This shaded bit here, well, we can all say what fraction it is. It's a quarter, and that's not a percentage. But if we turn that into a fraction out of 100, we'll get the percentage. Now, you have to kind of know your times tables a bit, but I know that if I times 4 times 25, I'll get 100, because I know there's 4 25s in 100. And I'm going to do the same with the top. So that is a percentage. And it's 25%, because it's 25 out of 100. So let's just look at the other bit. So if we shaded the other bit here, we are. We can see that that is 3/4, and that's not a percentage. But we can turn that into a fraction out of 100 by timesing it by 25 for the same reason as before. And you can see that this one is going to be 75 out of 100. So this is a percentage here, and it's 75%. So let's do it with a different shape and a different number. So here's a little strip. It's been split into 5 bits. You're going to have to believe that my drawing is good enough that they're all the same. So this little bit here, well, it's one piece shaded out of 5, so that's the fraction, but that's not a percentage. But we can turn it into a percentage if you know that 5 goes into 100 20 times. So if we times the top and the bottom by 20, then you get 20 out of 100, and that's a percentage. It's 20%. Now, obviously, these are all nice numbers, and I can do them without a calculator in my head, and I'll show you later how to deal with percentages that aren't very nice, but the basic idea here is really, really straightforward. You can write down fractions just like you write down fractions of other things, and if your fraction is out of 100, then it's a percentage. A percentage is just a fraction out of 100. We've looked at a couple of shape examples. I thought we'd just look at a number example here. 3 out of 20. Now, you can visualize that in several ways. You could visualize it as some sort of shape and split into bits. You know how many bits it's going to be split into, don't you? It's going to be 20 bits. I'm not going to draw them all. And you know how many are going to be shaded? Yeah, there's going to be 3 shaded. So it's 3 shaded out of 20. And so it won't surprise you to see the fraction is 3 out of 20. And if you can get used to calling fractions something out of something else, that might make your life easier. Now, that's not a percentage, is it? It's not out of 100. And if you know how many 20s make 100, which I do, it's 5. So that gets me to 100. So I do the same on the top, times by 5, and that's 15. That's a percentage. and the percentage is obviously 15%. So you could think of this little sign here as a quick way of writing out of 100, and that's exactly what it is. Finally, we're just going to look at this example here. We're going to look at 1% of 300. Well, this is a bit tricky, and this is leading us on to the next stage of percentages, really. So 1%, what did we just say? Well, a percent is a number out of 100. It's a fraction. So this is 1/100th, because it's 1%, and a percent is out of 100. So when we're asking for 1% of 300, we're really saying what's 100th of 300. So we split, slibit. Here we are. You can tell it's late. I'll leave you to guess what time I'm doing this, but it's not a good time of day. Split 300 into 100 bits. Bist. Really not a good idea to be doing this now. Now mathematically we can work that mathematically because it's 300 split divided into 100 bits, and that's 3 in each bit. So 1% is 3. That might be the stage where you might have to think about what I've done there for a while. What I've done is I've said I know that that's 100th, so I've chopped that into 100 pieces, and each piece has got 3 in it. If I did 3 times 100, I'd get 300. So 1/100th, 1% is 3. Now, that's your first thing really, knowing that a percentage is just a fraction. The second thing is how to work out any percentage of a number. And again, that's pretty straightforward too. There's a few tricks that we're going to use, and bear in mind you can use the tricks without fully understanding them, and often understanding comes a bit later, so don't feel bad about understanding how to do something but not really quite getting why it works. You want to get why it works, but you don't have to start with. So here are some tricks. We've just done one of them. Okay, so to find 1% of a number, you divide by 100. And there's several of these that are quite handy depending on what sort of problem you're doing. So 1% you divide by 100. The next one that's quite handy is 10%, because there's 10 tens in 100. So to find 10% of a number, you divide by 10. And this one always confuses people really, I think, because they think, oh, if you divide, to find 10 you divide by 10, so to find 20 you divide by 20, and it's not true. To find 5%, that's a handy one. So if you want to find 5% of a number, you half your 10%. Another one that's handy is 50%. You divide your number by 2. So we're going to have a go at trying some of these out on some numbers, okay? Now, it's really important that you find the percentage of the right number. So ask yourself, which number am I trying to find a percentage of? Now, let's make up a number. Let's have 320. So we're going to find 35%. And I suggest when you're starting out that you lay your workings out in this sort of fashion. So 35%, we're just going to look up here and we're going to see which of these fit nicely into 35. Well, we could find one fits into 35. There's 35 ones in there. So we could find 1%. That would be useful. 10% is quite handy because 3 tens make the 30. but we'd need the 5. So there's several ways we could go about it. I'm going to go about it this way. So, first of all, I'm going to write down what I know. 320 is 100%. It's my whole number. So, 10% is going to be that divided by 10. If I divide it by 10, I get 32. So 32 is 10%. And if I want to know what 5% is, well, 5% is half of 10%. So I half this number here, because this number is the 10%, and half of 32 is 16. And now I've got my basic building blocks. I can use them to build up the 35. So 35% is made up of 3 lots of 10% and a 5%. So let's just do that now. 3 lots of 10%, so that's 3 lots of 32. 3 30s is 90, and 3 2s is 6, so it's 96. And 5% is 16. And we add the 16 there. So 35% is 106, 112. And there we go. That's really as simple as they come. Now, if you had a slightly harder number, let's just pick a more nasty number. Let's pick 74. And we wanted to find, I don't know, 12%. Find 12%. We can do the same thing. I'm just going to show you the quickest way, and this is the best way. This is probably the best way if you've got a calculator, but it's not the best way if you don't. So I'm going to start with finding 1%. So to find 1%, remember you divide by 100. So 74 divided by 100 is 0.74, and that is 1%. Now, if I know what 1% is, I can find any percentage I like. To find 12%, I times 1% by 12. So there we go, times it by 12, that'll get us 12%. And I've got to do the same over here. I've got to times that by 12. And I'm just going to use a calculator for that, so 0.74 times by 12. And that gives me 8.88. It's not a very nice number, but we've just worked out that 12% is 8.88. That's life. That is, sometimes you don't get nice numbers. Now, what's next? Well, there's only one real thing left, and that's just to sort of talk about how percentages are used in questions and in life. So I'm just going to go through a few things that will help with that. So first of all, we're going to talk about words that are used with percentages. And these words turn up a lot. So first of all, percentages are often used to give discounts. So you might see that in a shop. It doesn't look very right, does it? It's, believe me, I tried to spell that right. I'm going to write that again. Discount. Another word related to discount is decrease. So a number might decrease by a percentage. You might also, when you're talking about cars, you normally see the word depreciate or depreciation. So those are both words that are used to mean go down. Another one might be reduce. So all these words here, and you look out for them, or you might also see the word sale. These are all subtracting or taking away words. And you have the similar sort of set of words for making things go up. So instead of discounts, you might increase a price. You might have tax. In particular, VAT, that's often used to increase prices. The opposite of depreciate is appreciate. Although you rarely see that in exams, that's certainly a word that gets used a lot. And you also see the word interest. Now, interest comes in two sorts. There's simple interest and compound. interest. And I would suggest that you don't want to worry about these things right now. You want until you've got your head around the basic idea with percentages, and then this is a sort of the next thing you'd learn about. Interest is an interesting topic because some interest leaves you better off. For example, if you put your money in a savings account, then they give you money. Not a lot, but they give you some money. That's interest, and that's good for you. But if you borrow money off somebody else, then they charge you interest, and that's bad for you. So interest goes in both, really. But either way, these words are all about adding on. So we've got the adding words and taking away words, and you need to watch out for those words because they will turn up in exam questions and in real life, because this is a bit of maths which everybody comes across. So let's just make up a couple of examples, one of each, just to give you a bit of a feel for it. So first of all, let's reduce £20 by, let's go for 6%. So first we work out 6%, and then number two, we're going to take it away from £20. Okay, so that's the basic step. So to work out 6%, so remember what we said earlier, I started with 100%, didn't I? So 100% is £20, and 10% is £2, and 5%. Well, 5% is half of 10%. If 10% is £2, 5% is £1 because it's halved. And 1%, well, I'm going to divide my 100% by 100, so 1% is £0.2 or 20p. So this is my selection of building blocks, and I'm going to use these to build 6%. So 6% is a 5% and a 1%, and of course 5% is 1, 1% is 0.2. So 6% is £1.20. Now, that's stage one done. We've worked out the percentage, and now we've got to use the word. So the word here is reduce, and reduce is a taking away word, which is why we're going to take it away, and we're going to take it away from the original price, which is £20. So we do £20, and we take away £1.20. So that's 90, that's £18.80. And that's our answer there. So any of these words here, turning up here, would have told us that we have to take it away. So you've got two problems. You've got, can you work out what the percentage is, and then do you know what to do? Do you know whether it's a taking away or an adding problem? So let's just look at an increasing problem now. So so let's make up. Since this is Rebekah, we'll have Rebekah has £100. Let's make it £200. She won at a golf tournament. And you put it in the bank, she puts it in the bank, and she gets, what should we say? We'll say very generous rate of interest, shall we? Let's make it 3.5% interest. How much is in her account after a year? Now, to understand this, you need to know a few things about interest. Usually gets paid annually, not always. We're going to assume this is paid annually, since I've just made the question up. But the other thing about interest is it's almost always an adding on thing. Now, how can we tell that from the question? Well, you can't really tell it from the question. You have to know that if you put money in a bank account and you get interest, then that's an adding on thing. If it was a taking away interest, they usually make that pretty obvious. So let's, first of all, we need to find out 3.5% of, well, it's percentage of her money that she invests, so it's of the £200 here. And then number 2, we have to add the 3.5% on to the £200. So notice the same pattern, and the pattern here is we have a number and a percentage, and normally you find the percentage of that number, but we have to be careful. We find the percentage of the right number, and then we look for which word is turning up, and as I said before, you've really got 2 sets of words. You've got the adding words and the subtracting words. Okay, well, let's go for it then. So it's an adding word, so 3.5%. So I'm going to do this just like I showed you before. So 100% is the 200 quid, and we can say that 10% is 20 quid because I've divided it by 10, and 1% is £2 because I've divided this number by 100. Now notice I've got this 0.5% here, 3.5%, so it'd be quite useful to work out what 0.5% is, and that's not that hard because it's half of 1%. So 0.5% is £1 because I've halved the 1% and I've halved the £2. And these are my building blocks, so now I'm going to build up the 3.5%, and you can see 3.5% is 3 lots of 1% plus a 0.5%. So that's 3 times, and 1% is £2, so 2, and 0.5% is £1. 3 times 2 is 6, 6 plus 1 is £7. So that's my 3.5%. And now I can put the money in the bank. So at the end of the year, I've got this 200 quid in the bank, and now there's an extra £7 in the bank. So £207, and that £7 is money for doing nothing other than leaving the money in the bank. So depending on how good a business person you are, perhaps Rebekah would have been better off buying a better set of golf clubs and using it to win more money than she would have been leaving it in the bank, but that's certainly a question for the individual. I'll just finish by saying that percentages is a big topic. I haven't covered it all, but these are the really essential bits. So if you've listened to this and you think, oh, I'm beginning to get the idea of it, then you might like to find some questions yourself. There's some on My Maths, there's plenty on other websites, and if you know me, then you can come and find me and I'll give you some questions. But try them out. And if you get this, then the next bits of percentage aren't much harder really. You've made a really big start on getting your head around what is a confusing topic to the uninitiated. So we'll finish it there, and I hope you enjoyed it.